come up. The first slide is about community shares. So we've heard a bit over the couple of days about, someone gave a presentation earlier today about Purpose Capital and their fundraising efforts, and similarly some of the stuff that people in the Enspiral network and specifically Lumio have done in terms of raising capital. In the UK, we've been lucky enough to have, since the late 1800s, a legal structure and model that now allows for democratic equity crowdfunding for cooperatives. And it's been kind of under the radar for a long time, but ever since the 2008 crash, it's kind of been rediscovered. So I'm going to give you a few examples of that. Some basic statistics to start with. So in 2004, there were 5 community share issues that raised about £2 million. Sorry, 2009. No, it's not. Yeah. 2009, there were 5 community share issues raising about £2 million. And 6 years later, 2015, there are nearly 100 raising over 35 million. You can see in this picture here, once it goes full screen, I guess. The top left there is West Mills Solar Co-op. They raised £6 million in 6 weeks from over 1,600 members. And they're now one of the biggest solar co-ops in Europe. The cows next to it, if you ever see that.
Give it a second.
Yeah. Are part of their cows on Fordhall Farm in England, which is, it was run by a tenant farmer for, it's happening.
Good.
Yeah, it's going to be there. Anyway, Fordhall Farm was a tenant farm where a pioneering organic farmer managed it for decades, and they've built a really amazing, diverse grassland so that the cows can stay outside all year round. It doesn't get muddy. Similarly, they raised £800,000 in about 10 months to buy the farm once the guy who'd ran it for decades died, and his kids didn't want to see it go to waste. It was going to turn into a big corporate dairy, but they managed to save it. They raised £600,000 from over 7,500 people, which then leveraged another 200,000. The football stadium in the bottom left there, that's a story in some ways about Manchester United. So Manchester United, the world's biggest football or soccer club, if you're in this country, they've become increasingly corporate and expensive and all about profit and money. And lots of the fans got annoyed with that. So they started FCUM, or Fuckum, which stands for Football Club United of Manchester. And they raised over £2 million from over 2,000 members, which leveraged the extra money they need to build a whole new stadium, which cost £6.3 million. That was completed last year, I think. And then in the bottom right, we've got Hastings Pier, which was the first charitable community share issue in the country. And that is now a community-owned pier in southeast England. They raised 590,000 through community shares from over 3,000 people in 6 months. I mean, the pier is actually burnt down twice and things like that. So they've spent over 13 million on it, but the support and money raised through the community share issue helped leverage the rest of that money. You can find out lots more about community shares at that URL at the bottom there. Ooh, computer's gone to sleep. Now, all of those are sort of capital investment projects, which is what's best suited for community shares, which isn't necessarily exactly the same as how platform co-ops work, which normally, in most cases, don't involve a large capital asset that you need to purchase. So another example that was mentioned yesterday, actually, Positive News. They've existed for quite a long time, but they recently set up a multi-stakeholder co-op which now owns the brand and stuff. The original company still exists and does the day-to-day management or operating of the business, but it's overseen by this multi-stakeholder co-op, which raised £263,000 from 1,500 investors in 30 days from 33 different countries. That's pretty good. Their website is positive.news. And then Richard Barbrook touched on this earlier in his amusing summary of it all. But Jeremy Corbyn's Digital Democracy Manifesto referenced platform co-ops. It talked about creating a 21st century network democracy where everybody can be a political decision maker. There was a nice commitment to open source and open knowledge that runs throughout the document. They said they will foster the cooperative ownership of digital platforms for distributing labour and selling services, will introduce new laws guaranteeing secure employment contracts and an inalienable right of trade union membership for everyone who owns most or some of their livelihood on digital platforms, and they argued for a cooperative upgrade of the sharing economy. Another thing I want to mention in terms of things happening in the UK at the moment, that picture there is the Megazord, which is what's formed when all the different Power Rangers come together to form one big giant Power Ranger. No, it's both. It's both. Look, Power Rangers, see? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That Megazord is Power Rangers. I didn't know until I read the blog post about it, which is at that URL. So Outlandish are a London-based sort of digital co-op, and inspired by Enspiral and similar things, they've started the process of forming a co-op of digital co-ops in the UK, of which there are a surprising number. So they're about to meet this coming week, I think, and there are 40 so far. There's probably going to be a few more last-minute bookings, but there's 43 co-op members are going to attend this gathering from over 20 different co-ops, which have a combined turnover of at least about 3 million a year. I mean, most of that is 2 of the co-ops have over 1 million turnover, and they're meeting there, which is quite nice. Which is actually a worker-owned stately home in Sheffield. It was built in 1596 or something, but has been owned by the trade union movement since 1950. And they identified it as a possible educational and holiday centre, and started a co-op to buy it, and it opened in 1951. It's called Whatley Hall. But yeah, it's a nice, auspicious place for such an occasion. And then I wanted to talk about the FairShares model, which was mentioned in Darren's talk. So I'm part of the FairShares Association, which works on the FairShares model. The main website is there at the bottom. And there's recent news in that 6 organisations from Germany, Holland, UK, Hungary and Croatia have just successfully bid to the EU to get to start a network of FairShare labs in all those different countries to support the development of FairShare enterprises. So that's not specifically platform co-op things, but it's enterprises that are going to be based on the FairShares model. Some of them may end up being platform co-ops, who knows. So the 5 main principles of the FairShares model are wealth and power sharing between primary stakeholders, an ethical review of the choices of goods and services offered, an ethical review of the production and retailing processes, specification of social purpose and auditing of social impact, so both having a social purpose and measuring how much you're achieving it, and a social democratic model for the ownership, governance and management of capital. And to go into that in a little bit more detail, essentially they recognise 4 different stakeholder groups. There's the founder members, recognising the entrepreneurial effort that goes in by the original founders. There's labour shares to recognise the providers of labour and franchise them, user customer shares and investor shares. And the user customer and founder shares can all convert into investor shares, and there's all sorts of nice things that happen then. And also they have this idea about creating an intellectual commons. So in a FairShares compliant model, the idea is that individuals keep their own intellectual property, but they non-exclusively license it to the FairShares co-op, so the co-op can still use it should they ever leave, but then they can also use it. It doesn't become the ownership of the co-op itself. Some organisations that are exploring using the FairShares model. So there's Ubi in New Zealand, I think it is, which is out of our own backyard. They do lots of CSA, like community supported agriculture, veg box team stuff. We've drafted a set of model rules for them, but I don't think they've incorporated yet. Resonate, who've been mentioned a few times, brilliant project to create a cooperatively owned music streaming platform. Everyone should invest in them. Go to resonate.is now and do it. AnyShare were mentioned. We are Twitter. Rory Ridley-Duff, who's the main man behind the whole FairShares thing, has just written a nice post about how the FairShares model and the whole plan to buy Twitter are a match made in heaven. Time Founder, who are mostly Barcelona-based, have been exploring it, and they're building apps to try and help make it. And I'm also speaking to unnamed, because some of their investors would be upset if they knew. There's a tech startup started by a friend of mine in London, and they've currently got 2 million a month turnover and over 200,000 customers. And they're just at that brink where they need more investment to carry on going, because despite those metrics, they're still losing money, as tech startups often do for a long time. But they need some more investment, but if they take more investment, they're going to lose control of having overall control. So we're trying to explore with them ways they can take a turn towards the cooperative path. And I think if we find that model, there'll be a huge pipeline of projects that are on the brink of taking VC money, and if we can point them in a different direction, that'd be really powerful. And I'll end by saying everyone should come to the big platform co-op conference I'm organising with some friends in London in February. And you can find out more about that by going to open.coop and clicking on conference. Thank you very much. There's loads of other things I wanted to say, but never mind. I mean, one of them was the Worker Co-op Solidarity Fund, which I should mention, which is totally awesome. Check it out, solidfund.coop.
So you are all getting the awesome award, of course, for